Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's presentation that will prepare you for California's SB721 balcony inspections. This presentation will be recorded and shared on Partners' website. The audience will be muted during the presentation, and I ask that everyone take a couple minutes to familiarize yourself with the control panel. You can open up the question chat dialog to input your questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll take some time to answer any questions that you all may have, and then we'll wait just a couple more seconds just so people can log on. Okay, so today you will be hearing from Patrick Kozan and myself, Sherry Fikes. I am a client manager with Partner Engineering and Science, and I support the Structural Solutions Department and have helped expand our balcony inspections program that was created in 2019. I have close to a decade of experience working with property management companies, real estate firms, and building owners. I would now like to introduce Patrick Kozan, who functions as our technical lead for our balcony inspections team out of our Pasadena office.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Patrick Kozan, and I'm the technical lead for the balcony inspection team. I'm a licensed civil engineer here in California with almost 10 years of engineering consulting experience, performing structural forensic investigations and seismic risk assessments across all sectors and building types, as well as seismic retrofit design solutions for existing multifamily residential buildings. I've been involved with the balcony inspection and repair process since 2019, and I'm accustomed to the many variations of different multifamily building layouts and the many different structural and waterproofing conditions that exterior elevated elements may have. So I'll hand it over to Sherry, who will briefly summarize Partner Structural Services.
Thank you, Patrick. Balcony inspection services fall under our structural services discipline. Partner currently does structural assessments in 31 states, while our design work is more focused on the Western states. All of these services make us a leader in multifamily structures. Partner's assessment practice has a nationwide footprint, and some of our structural services that we provide are structural inspections and assessments, mandatory and voluntary seismic retrofits, peer review and cost control, and new construction design plans.
So before we go deep into the legal requirements of SB 721, it's important to understand its origins. This law was conceived after a tragic and deadly balcony collapse that occurred at the Library Gardens apartment building in Berkeley, California. While celebrating a birthday party, 6 international students died and 7 others were severely injured when the balcony they were on collapsed. An investigation was performed and concluded that the balcony was not necessarily overloaded, but that the wood framing was rotted. Having been built in 2007 and the incident occurring in 2015, this building was only 8 years old and still considered relatively new, which is why the law requires that even new buildings must be inspected. The investigation also revealed a similar imminent collapse risk at the other one balcony at this building. So the primary cause of failure at this balcony was wood deterioration due to rot, which is often the most concerning issue to inspect for with these wood frame structures. So what is rot and how does it grow? Rot's a type of fungus that requires a moist environment to grow in, a temperature between high 60s, low 90s Fahrenheit, and a food source, which is typically the cellulose in the wood. So rot essentially eats the fibrous polymers within the wood, thus weakening it. Well, this balcony had a reported issue of mushrooms growing out of the exterior. The other balcony at this property did not have a similarly reported issue, nor was there evidence from rot from the exterior. The condition was only revealed after the investigation. Oftentimes, there are no signs of rot from the exterior, and if you do see such obvious evidence, such as a fruiting body of the fungus or a mushroom poking out of the balcony, this likely indicates an already massive infestation within the framing cavity. So how did this environment in this framing cavity become so conducive to rot? The cause isn't 100% clear, but conditions that exacerbated the issue may have included insufficient drying of the wood elements prior to installation of finishes, improper installation of the waterproofing system, and the higher absorption or moisture retention qualities of the multi-layer OSB sheathing. So this building really brought to light the potentially overlooked construction practices within the industry and reinforced the significance of water protection for wood. So here is one more example. This photo was taken during another investigation up in the Bay Area. And this building was designed by the same design team as the last building. Before the investigation, there was only some water staining evident on the outside. The extent of moisture intrusion wasn't clear. So the inspector decided to remove all finishes to get a clear look. And when they removed the finishes, they noticed that the lumber looked wet, but it still looked solid. So they decided to remove the deck. They found that this beam was completely hollowed out from rot, and that the damage started at the top, which is where the moisture likely began infiltrating. If you take a look at the other lumber in this photo, you'll notice that it looks new. Both the rotted lumber and the newer looking lumber were installed during the same construction, so this became another example of how newer buildings are not less at risk for failures. And now I'll pass it on to Sherry, who will provide an introduction to SB721 and Partner's role in helping you navigate through it.
Thank you, Patrick. We are all here for one reason today. At Partner, we completely understand that balcony repairs can be unforeseen. We feel your pain, but we do have an agenda to meet the law. California building owners and operators are required to comply to Senate Bill 721 by engaging with a balcony inspection service provider. Now let's talk compliance and how does one comply with the law? Well, compliance is a process. It's not a complicated process, but it's definitely a process. It begins from the moment an owner contacts an inspector. The inspector follows the inspection guidelines, surveys the properties, and prescribes the outcomes based on health and safety considerations, which will often lead to different follow-up actions. Balcony inspections is a California state-specific program at Partner. We currently have multiple crews providing inspection services statewide. Our crew consists of architects, contractors, technicians, and engineers who are highly specialized with multifamily buildings. Partner continues to improve our process by incorporating advanced tools for higher productivity and better client experience. Our standard timeline is 45 days to receive a report. When immediate actions are identified, you will receive the report within 15 days. So far, we have completed reports for thousands of units, and one of our largest portfolios consisted of 836 balconies, 1,200 feet of elevated walkways, and 50 exterior stair landings. So let's dive straight into today's learning objectives. Our goal is to share the best practices and what we have learned to date about California balcony inspections. After this presentation, you will learn more about balcony inspections and have the answers to what properties are subject to the ordinance, inspection scope of work, process during inspection, and what we look for, how to find qualified providers for the inspections, and what to consider when hiring an inspector or contractor, and what the schedule, budget, and subsequent work repairs may look like, also different paths you can take to become compliant. Now let's discuss what properties are subject to the law. Patrick, can you tell us a little bit more about the types of properties that will require inspection?
Of course. So this law applies to buildings that contain 3 or more multifamily units, contain wood-framed exterior elevated elements, or triple-Es for short, which we'll define per SB 721 in the next slide, and is classified as an apartment building. Condominiums are not covered under this bill and are instead covered under the separate Senate Bill 326, which will not be a part of today's webinar. Newer buildings that fall into these categories must also comply with the law, but they may forego the January 1st, 2025 deadline if they meet certain criteria. For most buildings, whose permit application is dated 2019 or later, they may instead be inspected within 6 years of final certificate of occupancy. So if a building's permit application is dated 2020 and the certificate of occupancy is 2022, then the SB721 inspection must be completed by 2028. So what is an exterior elevated element, or an E3, or triple E for short? A triple E is defined as any of the following types of structures, including their supports and their railings. They include balconies, decks, porches, stairways, walkways, or entry structures that extend beyond the exterior walls of the building, have a walking surface that is elevated more than 6 feet above ground level, are designed for human occupancy or use, and rely in whole or in substantial part on wood or wood-based products for structural support. Something is a triple E if it meets all these 4 criteria. Here's a diagram of a building cross-section showing a range of typical triple E a building might have. Item A includes balconies, item B includes stairs and a landing or a walkway, and item C includes elevated walkways, all of which would be within the scope of the bill. This diagram also includes several elements that are not within scope of SB721, and these exempt elements include item D, which are roofs and roof decks, and item E, which includes a set of steps and a landing or a walkway, both with a walking surface 6 feet or less above grade. These would not be within the scope of the bill. So here's an example of a typical elevated walkway we would see at an apartment building, which includes the walking surface membrane, the stucco at the underside, and the steel guardrails attached to the walkway framing. Here we would inspect most things you see in the picture, other than the stucco concealed walls, and this would include the walking surface, the ceiling underneath it, as well as the structural wood elements within the framing cavity. The steel guardrail connections to the walkway must also be inspected. So here's an example showing a wood-framed elevated walkway and upper stair landing that are within scope. The upper stair landing is wood-framed, but the connected stairs are composed of steel stringers and precast concrete treads, which are not wood-framed. The connections at the stairway to the wood landing relies on wood for structural support, therefore the connections would fall within scope, but not necessarily for the entire stairway. The steel guardrails at the wood-framed walkway and the wood-framed upper landing are within scope. However, the guardrails at the stairs and the middle steel-framed landing are not within scope. Also, the middle landing relies on the adjacent concrete masonry unit wall and a steel column for structural support, not wood. Thus, that would be considered outside of scope. So here's an elevated wood deck. Assuming the walking surface is more than 6 feet above grade, this would be within scope. It's important to note that although this example shows open framing that's effectively well ventilated, it's still not immune to potential microbial infestation. And here's an example of a guardrail connection to wood decking that's concealed by the waterproofing membrane at the top. Guardrails will move as people lean against them, so deterioration of the waterproofing around its connections is common. To mitigate this issue, current construction practice tries to minimize these top-mounted connections. Side-mounted connections are typically stronger and easier to maintain. During inspection, we use a borescope camera to inspect and photo the wood framing conditions around this area to determine if there's evidence of water intrusion. If no evidence is found, a simple waterproofing repair recommendation may be sufficient. Otherwise, connection repair may be warranted. Nonetheless, guardrail connections to wood must be inspected. And where waterproofing system is present, the inspector must check that it's in adequate working order. Exposed wood is not necessarily bad if it was designed to be exposed, but if not, there could be some structural related deficiencies. In this photo, there's wood with its sides open to the sun, wind, rain, the elements. This wood would likely deteriorate eventually without proper waterproofing. There's also exposed wood on the underside, which is somewhat safe from the rain above, assuming that the waterproofing above is properly installed and maintained. So generally, some common signs of performance issues that are visible from the exterior of a triple E would include loose guardrails, deflection or lean of the triple E, soft spots at the floor, colored stains at the underside, or cracks in the topping or the finishes.
Thank you, Patrick. So one of the questions I get asked is, what is the process of inspection and scope of work? Patrick, can you tell us a little bit more about the process during inspection?
Sure. So the scope of work per the law is to determine if framing and associated waterproofing elements are in a generally safe condition, adequate working order, and free from any hazardous condition caused by fungus, deterioration, decay, or improper alteration to the extent that the life, limb, health, property, safety, or welfare of the public or the occupants is not endangered. So associated waterproofing elements typically include flashing, waterproofing membranes, coatings, sealants, stucco, and siding. And the law does not include proper installation of EEE unless immediate life safety hazards were identified. Also, the law only requires an inspection of at least 15% of each type of EEE. Inspecting more than the minimum 15% would be considered voluntary. However, in cases with poor EEE conditions, the inspection report may recommend additional inspections or repairs at other EEEs if the conditions are warranted. Most of the EEEs we inspect are generally safe, but might have some waterproofing issues that may risk moisture intrusion into the wood framing below, which greatly increases the chances of potential microbial growth and thus rot or decay in the wood elements. Cracks in stucco, for example, might be safe, but if they allow water to get into the wood framing, then it's not an adequate working order, in which case we would recommend corrective actions. These corrective actions may include something as small as repairing small sections of the waterproofing membrane or stucco if the damage is isolated and there's no evidence of moisture intrusion into the wood framing. It could also include replacement of significant portions of the waterproofing system if conditions are more severe. So to understand the conditions within the framing cavities, we need to inspect the framing in a way that's cost feasible and with as little disruption to the tenants as possible. So to inspect the framing cavity, partner drills holes into the underside of the EEE to inspect using a borescope camera. These holes can then easily be covered with temporary plugs to prevent insects or water from getting inside, and we do typically provide those temporary plugs. The building maintenance crew can later provide permanent sealant and paint to restore finishes. Here in the picture, you can see that there's a 5/8 inch diameter hole that doesn't look so intrusive and doesn't massively impact the aesthetic of the building. So our job during these inspections is to not only help you minimize risk, but to provide practical solutions that match your needs. We want you to be secure that our inspection not only complies with the law, but gives you the knowledge about the condition of your property. Partner logs its photos and notes live digitally through the cloud for proper documentation, storage, and organization, and we have licensed professionals who stand by their stamp reports.
So I would now like to go over a few important guidelines. By law, the inspector has 45 days to issue the report to the owner. All inspections must be completed by January 1st, 2025, unless a building permit is dated 2019 or later. The demand will likely peak this year, which will create higher pricing. That's why it is best to get your inspections done as soon as possible. All reports are to be kept on file for 2 inspection cycles, which is considered 12 years, and must be disclosed during any sales transactions. When immediate actions or safety hazards are identified, the law requires the inspector to report to local enforcement agencies. Patrick will now go over what a high quality report will look like.
So what's in a report? By law, it must document the condition of the property through narrative and photos. And for all elements inspected, the report must talk about their condition, their projected service life, recommendations on further inspection, if any, and recommended corrective actions, including non-immediate repairs or immediate repairs, if any. So this slide will give you a sense of time. The Library Gardens building was built in 2007 and failed in 2015, and Berkeley enacted their own emergency inspection ordinance in 2015, which became the starting point for the statewide law. And this was signed into law by the governor in 2018. So here we are in 2024, and this current cycle ends in 2025, January 1st, 2025. And this is when most inspections must be completed, except for those whose permit applications are on or after 2019, in which case inspections must be completed within 6 years of the date of issuance of the certificate of occupancy.
One of the other questions we often get is how to find qualified inspectors. What should I think about when finding an engineer? And in our opinion, the best way to find a qualified provider is making sure the architect, civil, or structural engineers are licensed or certified in California. It is best to find contractors with A, B, or C5 licenses, and they must have at least 5 years experience with multifamily wood frame buildings. Patrick, would you be able to touch on the potential conflict of interest when using the same person doing the inspections and the repair work?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Sherry. So in SB 721, contractors were originally disallowed from repairing balconies they inspect. The more recent Senate bill, SB 607, as well as the current law under Health and Safety Code section 17973, which adopted language from SB 607, recently allowed them to do both. I just want to reinforce that even though contractors may now perform both the inspection and the repair, we don't recommend you engage one for both. It's technically a conflict of interest when someone who does the inspection is incentivized to also find the repairs. So to avoid conflict of interest, we recommend hiring separate inspectors and contractors.
Let's go over a few things to consider when hiring. As an owner or operator, it is best to have a basic understanding of your exterior elevated elements. Hiring a highly experienced inspector can itemize repair work and minimize cost. You want to make sure you read the contract carefully. Also make sure they have insurance and proper licensing, and consider examining your EEEs before you hire an inspector. Keep in mind, a good inspector can reduce follow-ups. Here at Partner, we will work with you to find a cost-effective compliance solution for your properties. I would now like to go over some exclusions. Partner does not provide legal advice or legal interpretations of this bill. Questions related to legal matters will need to be addressed by an attorney, and questions related to other safety and health considerations can be addressed by our experts at Partner. So hey guys, we're about now halfway through our presentation. We still have some great content coming up. So thank you for staying focused. If you have any questions at this moment, feel free to list them in the chat. I'm sure you all want to know what the schedule, budget, and subsequent work repairs will look like. This is something that is subject to change. Pricing varies from project to project and all depends on the total number of EEEs that will require inspection. In the next few slides, Patrick will discuss some important details on outcomes and what the repairs will look like.
Yeah, so right now regarding scheduling, we're a couple to a few weeks out from starting inspections, and that may go up as we approach the deadline. So I'd advise to have the inspections performed as soon as possible. Regarding repair budget and timeframe, that'll depend on building condition. Well-maintained properties will generally have a lower cost of repairs, and the poorly maintained properties will generally have a higher cost of repairs. So here are the possible outcomes from the inspections in order from best to worst. Compliance outcome 1 is the best outcome. It's when everything is okay. No issues were found, no repairs are required. While we expect this to be more common for newer and well-maintained properties, the case study explained earlier shows that this isn't always the case. The report, though, will still document all areas inspected and provide photographs of their condition to reference for future inspections. Compliance outcome 2 is when non-emergency repairs are required. This category encompasses issues that are not generally safe condition or adequate working order. However, they do not pose an imminent safety hazard or collapse risk. These are basically repair recommendations that don't fall within the emergency repair category. Lastly, compliance outcome 3 is when immediate safety hazards are identified and emergency repairs are required. This requires immediate action tighter report timing, and city notification. So the next slide will go over compliance outcomes 1 and 2, and we'll return to compliance outcome 3 in a moment. For compliance outcome 1 or 2, whether no repairs are recommended or non-emergency repairs are recommended, the inspection report must be presented to the owner within 45 days of completed inspection. If no repairs are required, then no further action is needed. If non-emergency repairs are required and the work requires a permit, depending on local jurisdiction requirements, the owner must submit a report application within 180 days from the date of the report. Once the permit is approved, the owner has 120 days to perform the repair. The law requires that if the owner does not comply with the repair requirements within 180 days, the inspector must notify the owner and the city. And if repair progress is not made within 30 days from notification, a daily fine may be incurred up to $500 per day. Also, the report and other associated repair inspection documents must be kept on file for at least 2 inspection cycles, which is about 12 years. I'll also go over a couple scenarios where pretty bad conditions were found, but are still within the non-emergency repair category. So if we observe potential water deterioration that would be categorized as a non-emergency repair condition, we would typically recommend in the report for the contractor who's performing the repairs to remove finishes where deficiencies were found, and to continue to remove finishes to determine the extent of those deficiencies until no more is found, maybe plus 1 or 2 more feet just to be sure, and to remediate those deficiencies wherever found. So this typically involves replacing in kind by a qualified contractor, or to replace or repair utilizing the design of a qualified professional engineer. Another scenario is if we observed concerning deficiencies at several walkway sections, but not the entire walkway, since only 15% were inspected. We may recommend for the contractor to remove a strip of stucco down the entire length of walkway to determine the extent of deficiencies. We typically don't recommend partner to come out for further inspection. So the final outcome is compliance outcome 3, and it's when immediate safety hazards are found and emergency repairs are recommended. So the inspector has 15 days to notify the owner and also notify the local enforcement agency of the emergency condition. Ownership must take immediate action to keep people and property safe when instructed to do so by the inspector. So that involves ownership preventing all access to the EEE, including the area below, and potentially providing temporary structural support to shore the structure. The repairs must be permitted by the city, and the inspector must inspect the repairs once they are complete. So again, the law requires that if the owner does not comply with the repair requirements within 180 days, the inspector must notify the owner and the city. And if repair progress is not made within 30 days from notification, a daily fine may be incurred up to $500 per day. And again, the repair and other associated repair and inspection documents must be kept on file for at least 2 inspection cycles. So in this scenario, due to the poor condition of EEEs that are typically found in this category, the repairs typically involve replacement of most or the entire EEE. The report recommendations for this are usually extensive, but this condition occurs far less often than the prior outcomes.
Thank you, Patrick, for the detailed explanations, outcomes, and examples. And if this information seems complicated, we can help you unravel the process. Partner has 5 years of providing balcony inspection services. To date, only 90% of our projects that we have inspected fall under the first and second compliance outcomes, with very minimum follow-up actions. Only 10% of our projects have had immediate safety hazards identified. So don't worry, even with an unexpected outcome, Patrick and I will help with you to find a feasible compliance solution for your properties. As mentioned, it is best to have your inspections completed sooner than later to take advantage of competitive pricing. The time clock for inspections begins in 2025 and every 6 years after. Inspections completed prior to January 1st, 2025 will not need re-inspection until 2031. Lenders are expressing lots of interest, although we haven't heard of any lenders requiring these inspections as part of their due diligence, so it's possible that may happen in 2025. We also welcome the idea of having your repairs completed at the property before balcony inspections are conducted. We can also provide pre-inspection and pre-assessment services where we get familiar with the property and understand the general conditions of the EEEs, which we use to program our efforts for the actual inspection. So we have two packages at Partner. We have a standard package, which is our most commonly used package, and we have our custom package. So with our standard package, we typically conduct a desktop assessment, which is online research of the properties to confirm the information provided to us on the questionnaires. Our team will also do a field verification count where we physically go out to the property and count the EEEs. This is typically usual for larger properties. We will also work with you to identify the required 15% of EEEs for the inspection, and we will also plan a route for access, which will give you ample amount of time to provide tenant notifications. We will schedule all inspections with the owner or the management team. Patrick will now go over a couple of services that we can provide with our custom package.
Okay, so custom packages can include anything ranging from project and schedule management, which is especially useful for larger properties with many EEE types. It could include client-specific data collection and reporting, specifically utilizing Partner's new analytics capabilities, which we'll catch a glimpse of in a later slide. It could include patented permanent cementitious plugs and refinishing and repainting services. And it could include owner rep support for construction. So Partner utilizes technology during our inspections, where we log photos and data of our observations into our data collection software. And this happens immediately at the inspection location. The data is saved and transferred to our cloud-based report systems and potentially into our interactive report analytic dashboard, if that scope is included within the custom inspection package. So we'll take a look at some key points of the dashboard in the next slide. So the concept of the dashboard was to help property owners or managers get organized and assist them with regulatory compliance, record keeping, and to help them stay on top of any due diligence or balcony inspection related tasks. When you opt for a custom package, you can request this type of dashboard to organize your portfolio. You or your staff can access the dashboard, and you can provide control limits so that information isn't accidentally deleted or changed. This dashboard will also help you keep organized when the next balcony inspection comes around. The dashboard acts as an organizational and tracking tool for your balcony project at your property, but it's most useful, most powerful when it's used for multiple projects within a portfolio of properties. It displays basic property salient data, the report issue date, and whether repairs were recommended or not in the report. It also has a date tracking feature that helps you with tracking typical SB721 target dates, including by what date a permit must be pulled by, what date the repairs must be completed by, and what date the city must be notified. This dashboard feature is not limited to balcony projects. It can be integrated with any other property data for all your due diligence needs, which is a valuable function if you want a single place to store your property information and records, or as a tool to assist with owner's rep services.
Thank you, Patrick. Inspection rates are likely to fluctuate with market demand. Prices will generally go up as we get closer to the deadline. A lump sum quote is based on the scope of work and the total number of EEEs. Partner offers inspections only and not repairs, although we do offer a list of contractors who are skilled in balcony repair work. Repairs or removal of finishes, if required, must be done by a licensed contractor. Partner also offers owner's rep services to help manage repairs or contractors that you hire. So Partner has been offering balcony inspections for over 5 years, and we've learned some lessons along the way. In the next few slides, we want to share some further insights with you, such as understanding local jurisdiction requirements, which path is right for you, and some project examples.
Okay, so several local jurisdictions have their own special requirements in addition to standard SB 721 language. In Los Angeles, for example, an inspector has to submit their report through an online portal if emergency repairs are recommended within 15 days of completed inspection. And they would also notify the city if progress isn't made within 180 days through this online portal. No report is required to be submitted to LA if either non-emergency repairs are required or if no repairs are required. So in the city of San Jose, the inspector submits their report to the city email, and if emergency repairs are recommended, they would submit it within 15 days of completed inspection. Also, if non-emergency repairs are recommended, they would submit that report within 45 days of completed inspection. No report is required to be submitted if no corrective work is required. And in Berkeley, they also have their own special set of requirements. An inspector has to fill out an inspection certification summarizing the report findings and submit either through email, mail, or via an online request form. And the owner has kind of a stricter timeline to adhere by. They have to apply for the permit within 60 days of submitting certification and complete all corrective work within 90 days of obtaining the permit. And once the work is complete, they need to get a second inspection and submit that new inspection certification form using either email, mail, or online request form. So again, no report is required to be submitted if no corrective work is required. And San Francisco is a little bit of a special case. They've had a local mandatory ordinance since 2002 under the SF Housing Code Section 604. The inspector has to provide an affidavit proving compliance if conditions are okay, or after repairs have been completed every 5 years. To my knowledge, this doesn't supersede SB 721. You would still need to do your SB 721 inspection. And for most jurisdictions in California, there are no additional requirements beyond the standard SB 721 language.
So I get tons of questions from owners asking, what are the penalties if non-compliant? Actually, that is one of the most questions we get. SB 721 is adapted as California's building code. Non-compliant means there is a code violation. We are expecting to see more local code enforcement agencies, including balcony inspections, into their routine inspections in the future. If repairs are not underway within 180 days of inspection report, the inspector must notify the city. If progress is not made within 30 days of notice, the city could fine the owner up to $500 per day. The Los Angeles Housing Department is taking initiatives to inspect existing residential properties for laws, regulations, and code compliance set forth in the Los Angeles Housing Code. The Los Angeles inspection includes maintenance, sanitation, ventilation, occupancy, and enforcement of those requirements governing any alteration, addition, or repair. Patrick will now go over to discuss a few paths with you that you can take to become compliant.
So Partner provides 2 paths to choose from to meet SB 721 compliance. The first path is the standard SB 721 inspection report, which we've discussed throughout this presentation so far. The alternate second path is through the pre-assessment process, which is a process developed by Partner that intends to identify maintenance and capital program needs at the subject property as necessary to maintain its EEEs, and ultimately provides an SB 721 inspection report at the end. So it begins with a pre-assessment report and has a couple different steps than the standard SB721 process, and ultimately ends with a final SB721 report. So I'll briefly summarize the advantages between the two report paths here, and then I'll go over the steps of each service in the next slides. The advantage of the pre-assessment process is that once you receive the pre-assessment report, you're not locked into as strict of a time frame to make the repairs, which gives you time to allocate funding and repair at your own pace. It also includes a cost table showing estimated repair costs of the deficient EEs that were assessed, and the cost table also shows an estimated projected cost of EEE repairs throughout the entire property, not just the 15% minimum. Lastly, to meet the requirements of the law and to produce a final SB721 inspection report, we would perform inspections after repairs have already been made, and only at the previously deficient locations called out in the pre-assessment report. We would not need to inspect all 15% of the EEs assessed in the original pre-assessment, just the locations recommended to have corrective work, unless of course all 15% were deficient. So the end result in this path would be a clean SB721 report citing no repairs being required. And here's a step-by-step comparison between both the pre-assessment service and the standard SB721 inspection service. Step 1 at both services is typically identical. We gather EEE counts either through a desktop review, if the subject property is straightforward or typical, or site reconnaissance if the site is more complex. In most cases, step 1 can be done through a desktop review. Step 2 is almost identical as well. This is where we perform the on-site portion of the service. The on-site pre-assessment is similar in technique to the on-site SB721 inspection, where we confirm the EEE counts, choose a minimum of 15% of each EEE type, and then perform the visual exterior and destructive investigation through drilling and borescope observation. However, in the pre-assessment, we also provide a full-length, non-destructive observation of all the walkway exteriors prior to choosing the minimum 15%. So in the pre-assessment report, we also opine on the general condition of all the walkways. Step 3 is the report issuance to the client. So the advantage of the pre-assessment report here is to avoid most of the time constraints presented by SB721 so that building owners can prepare for the repairs without having that looming 120-day permit, 120-day repair deadline encroach on them. The pre-assessment report will also have repair cost estimate table to help you understand your capital needs, and it would include an estimated repair cost for the deficiencies found on site and also provide a cost estimate for repairs of all the EEs at the entire property. So, for example, if we found that deficiencies existed for 15% of the 15% that were inspected, we would scale that up to 50% of all the EEs at the property. One more thing to note is that if the pre-assessment resulted in no issues found, we convert the report into an SB721 report showing no repairs required at a no-cost change order. In this case, no further action is required by the owner other than to keep the report on file for a minimum of 2 inspection cycles. So in the standard SB721 inspection scenario, if the inspection report has no corrective work or has only non-emergency repair recommendations, partner's role typically ends here, and the owner has to adhere to the strict permit and repair time constraints of SB721. However, if the inspection report has emergency repair recommendations, the inspector, which would be partner, would notify the local jurisdiction and eventually inspect once the repairs are completed. So step 4 for both scenarios would be for the owner to repair the conditions called out in either the pre-assessment report or the SB721 report. Partner does not provide repair services as we're not the contractor. Step 5 would be follow-up inspections. For the pre-assessment report, we would perform follow-up inspections at the previously deficient locations called out in the pre-assessment report once repairs are complete. This typically happens in 2 phases. once when repairs are completed, but finishes are still removed, so that when our inspectors go back on site, they don't need a team with them to remove the finishes to get a look at the interior conditions. And they would need to go out once more when the finishes have been applied, so we can verify that the waterproofing system has been restored. For the standard SB721 inspection, partner only needs to perform further inspections if emergency repairs were called out in the report. The follow-up inspection would be similar in format to the pre-assessment scenario. And step 6, receiving the final SB721 report. The end result here for the pre-assessment process would be a clean SB721 report citing no repairs being required. And the end result of the standard SB721 inspection with emergency repairs would be a final SB721 report citing that the repairs have been completed, and the inspector, which again would be partner, would notify the local jurisdiction once more. I do have to clarify one caveat regarding the pre-assessments. Per the law, an SB721 inspection must still be completed by January 1st, 2025, unless you have a newer property. So with the pre-assessment approach, ideally, the repairs would be completed before January 1st, 2025, so that we can provide that final inspection report before that deadline. So this graphic shows the typical step-by-step process of a EEE pre-assessment. It's essentially the same information we just went over, just with a nicer graphic. So I won't retread ground here. And here's a step-by-step graphic of a typical SB721 inspection. And again, it's essentially the same information we just went over. So now I'll pass it over to Sherry, who will go over several portfolio projects that we've helped clients achieve compliance with.
Thank you, Patrick, for that detailed information. So here is one of our larger portfolios. Partner Engineering and Science has been a service provider assisting GK Management since 2017 by providing bundled services, including balcony inspections. We worked on 150 sites, 82 cities throughout 8 states. This client is a nationwide multifamily property management firm, and what they liked most about our services was that we provided easy data reporting, we helped with capital planning, and we also assisted with regulatory compliance. So now I'll go over to one of our smaller project profiles. Here's an example of JKW Property Management, which is a local management firm based out of Los Angeles, California. We've provided services to them since 2013 and have completed 17 of their properties thus far. Majority of their assets are 2- to 3-story apartment buildings located in Southern California. What they liked most about our services was that we provided detailed reports, which was easy for them to receive contractors' estimates. Also, the level of communication and flexibility that we provided. So after listening to today's webinar, you should have more information on how to comply and what properties are subject to the law, inspection scope of work, how to find qualified providers for the inspections, what the schedule, budget, and subsequent work repairs will look like, and also some paths to take to become compliant. Now, Partner's technical team, including Patrick, are usually in the field, so please be sure to channel your inquiries to your partner representative. If you don't have one, I'd be happy to provide pricing and assist you with your properties. So thank you to our wonderful audience for listening to today's presentation. And as mentioned, this recording will be listed on Partner's website. And now we will open the floor to answer any questions or concern related to today's presentation. And if there's any questions we are not able to get to today, please be sure to email me and I'd be happy to answer them. So we will answer some questions. We have a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay, so the first one looks like, is the fact that there have been no visible fungi, other issues on balconies, walkways in a building for 20 years indicative that things are generally in working order? Not necessarily. For example, if the waterproofing is not in working order, it would show signs of wear, maybe some cracking at the waterproofing membrane, maybe some cracking at the stucco, or some staining on the waterproofing membrane. So just because you don't see signs of fungus, it doesn't mean that the balcony is in working order. And oftentimes, conditions are only visible at the interior of the walkway framing. So doing a borescope investigation would clear up a few of those concealed conditions.
Looks like the other question we have is, how often do inspections have to be done? So inspections are required to be done every 6 years. And there is another question that says, if a GC is doing an inspection, does it have to be a licensed person or can it be an employee of the GC? So Patrick, I'll let you answer that one, but I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, our interpretation of the law at Partner is that it does have to be a licensed person, and that would be either a licensed architect, a licensed civil or structural engineer, or a contractor who's licensed with a B or C5 license. I forgot the exact requirements. Or a building inspector who's certified by a institution that's recognized by the state of California.
Okay, so we have another question that says, how is the 15% calculated on a covered EEE? Is it like one hole's drilled or every linear feet?
Yeah, so typically it's 2 to 3 holes every 8 to 12 linear feet. It kind of depends on the property itself and the conditions we see. Our inspectors typically decide if more holes are warranted if conditions are worse. And our placement of the holes are in various areas. Some of them are placed at the edge of the EEE, where damage is most common that we've seen. And holes are also placed closer to the exterior wall in a cantilevered condition, which is where a collapse would be most harmful. So we provide holes in multiple locations at the EEE every few feet.
Okay, and then the next question we have is, what do you think about the prospect of possibility making an existing condition worse due to opening up sealed exterior to get access to balcony framing to inspect? How do you mitigate these risks?
Yeah, so when we drill a hole to do the borescope inspection, immediately after the inspection, we apply a temporary plug to conceal the conditions again so that the waterproofing membrane is back into its prior state. We do also provide permanent cementitious plugs as a custom package, which is a permanent solution. So yeah, if you tend to open up the EEE in a more intrusive, destructive manner, it's I guess a little riskier than just drilling a hole inside and then covering up that hole.
Okay, and the next question is a structural engineer always needed for level 2 corrections? And I think by level 2 corrections mean the final inspection.
Yeah, it would be the same inspector, or it could be the same inspector that worked on the first set of inspections. So if they found, let's say for a standard SB721 report process, they found emergency repair conditions, and then repairs are recommended, they can come out again after repairs have been made to re-inspect the conditions to verify if the repairs were made properly.
Okay, and we are approaching our last question. So is 15% of each building on the property required or 15% of the property as a whole required to be inspected?
Yeah, so the law doesn't specifically define it. We would take a practical approach to this. So if the property is small and reasonably manageable, we will do 15% of each building at the property. But if the property is massive and encompasses like an entire block or multiple blocks, then we'll be less stringent on that requirement. And that looks like all the questions we have.
Yes. So once again, please feel free to reach out to us or your partner representative. Our emails and our contact information is listed. If you have any further questions or if you would like to get pricing for your properties, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to assist you guys. Thank you everyone for joining and have a wonderful day.
Thanks everyone.